in the news editorial track. And here, and I double majored in general political science. So that education was really, really helpful in the journalism career. I would want to practice in all the places that Dr. Tait mentioned. And what I have here is basically a short compilation of the questions that a lot of the students that I've been speaking to on campus this week have asked. And I think if I answer them for you guys today, it'll kind of answer some of the questions you may have for someone who just graduated and is out there and in competitive New York City, and everyone else is just as good as you are, maybe even better. So if you're in Germany for a little while, I'll answer some of these questions. I think you'll get a better sense for how it is to be in the real world. Real world for what it is, actually, that's a construct, but we'll just call it the real world. Okay, so I got into journalism. I decided I was going to be a journalist in 10th grade, actually. I was blessed enough to kind of decide, but I also didn't agree early. And the reason I got into journalism is purely personal. It gave me a license to be nosy. And I came from a nosy family anyway, and I was like, wow, this is an industry where I can like pry and dig into people's stuff, and it's okay. So I'm like, I can do this. And I also felt like, out of all the things I could do with my life, I'm half decent at writing. I mean, I'm not the best at it, but I'm not god awful. So I get to be nosy and I get to practice writing, which I'm half decent at. Maybe this might be a good career for me. That's kind of the inkling I had in late high school and maybe the first couple of weeks when I got here. And so I got to school here and I signed the major here. I started working for CM Life. And I worked for CM Life for 3.5 semesters. I had like 4 different beats for them. And the combination of my classes here, working for CM Life, and the fact that I had 4 internships before I graduated, all were very instrumental in getting me to, again, the places that Dr. Tait had mentioned, Times and the Associated Press, and the stint I had covering higher ed for Herald. So nowadays, I'm in New York City, and I'm a grad student at New York University, and I'm studying sort of a new and emerging genre in journalism writing. It's called narrative journalism. I don't know if anyone's been exposed to that yet. It's kind of a new genre, and I'm 1 year into it, and I have another 4 years to go. I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited about living in New York City for the time being because there's a lot of great writers out there, a lot of great ideas, and it's a place that's completely saturated with story ideas. Either you in the room who are reporting on a regular basis here in the city, you might find that sometimes it's difficult to come up with stories or ideas of things that are happening. That is never the case in New York City. If the people in this room went to New York City and walked on the neighborhoods, there's no way you couldn't come back without at least 4 story ideas. I mean, it's just that saturated in that city. There's so many stories everywhere. So while I'm in graduate school, I'm freelancing for a couple of places. I'm also still freelancing for New York Times.com. I work with them over the summer. But whenever I come upon a decent piece, I freelance with them just to, keep my skills fresh while I'm going to graduate school. And one of the questions throughout the week a lot of students have been asking me is, well, how do you find the stories that you pitch to, the places that you freelance for, when there's so many journalists and so many stories in New York City? I have to tell you, in a city with millions and millions of residents, and thousands of journalists covering their story, there's very few people who are willing to grab a notebook and go into a neighborhood and just walk around and be curious. There's nothing in our industry that can equate to getting out there and burning shoe leather and talking to people, asking questions, figuring out why that's there now, even though it wasn't here yesterday. And that's what I do a lot. I walk around neighborhoods and I'm nosy and I'm curious. I mean, it's all be a story, or maybe someone's written that before, or maybe that's just a dead letter in the water. So I like to walk around neighborhoods, ask questions, do research on something that I think might be a story. And if it is, or I have pitches to places that I freelance for, sometimes they reject them, sometimes they don't. That's kind of how the life of New York City freelancer works. You are extremely, extremely curious. You're always out walking around the city, and you're pitching ideas all the time. It helps you a lot, particularly if you leave New York City and you're working in a different market. You're really, really trained out where to spot story ideas, because you have to do so much of a freelancer in New York City, and you have so much competition that you end up coming up with the best ideas in order to stay competitive. So when you have a job like that, there's some parts of it that are difficult and some parts that you like. And I like that a lot of people like to ask me what are parts of my job that I like and I dislike. And when you're working in a newsroom, whether it's online or at a TV station, whatever format that may be, for the most part, when you graduate from here, you'll be in a newsroom where your colleagues are people who have been there for decades or maybe a couple of years, and they're all really, really smart people. They all really think, they're forward-thinking about whatever beat they cover or whatever issue they're about. And it's just a journalist mentality to like to be around intelligent people. And in some ways, if you're aggressive enough about being better, you actually become smarter just through osmosis, being in a newsroom that's staffed by a lot of intelligent people. And so, personally, when I'm working on staff somewhere, I enjoy being surrounded by extremely, extremely intelligent people. When I was working at NewYorkTimes.com, I had colleagues who had master's and doctorate degrees from Harvard and Princeton and Yale, and it was nothing for these people to come straight out of Ivy League and work for the Times or work for the Boston Globe or work for Wall Street or the Pulse. And these are all incredibly, incredibly intelligent people. And you learn a lot from them just, having a conversation with them. But what I don't like about the industry, particularly if you're in the newsroom and you're in staff somewhere, is your hours aren't always a perfect 9 to 5. So if there's anything outside your life that has to be scheduled, there's a TV show that you always watch at this time, or there's a time that you work out always at this time of day, at this day. That's not going to work in journalism, because one time you'll have a shift that's 9 to 5, and then the next day you'll have one that's 7 a.m. to 3, or then you have one that's 4 to midnight. Or it always staggers depending on what you're working on, the organization that you're at. It varies a lot. So if you're looking into going into this career, be ready to know that it's not going to be a clear-cut, time-punching type of day for you. Sometimes the most difficult part of being a reporter, I think, is when you have a really good story and you need an interview to really make that story sing. And it's difficult for that source, for you to get in contact with that source, whether they're out of town, or they have to call, returning your call, they have to return your emails, or whatever it is. I get easily frustrated when I can't get that missing piece that will make a piece just beautifully sing. And that's part of the business too. I mean, sometimes you can't get a hold of everyone that you need to make your piece complete. That doesn't mean you spike it. That just means there's something externally going on that you have no control over, that you just kind of have to work around and talk with your editor with, and you got to move on. You got to have tough skin for that. You got to be willing to move on and say that you did the best you could with that piece, and then move on to whatever you have next going on. And one of the other questions that a lot of people like to ask me is, because I'm a writer, I've written for a lot more prestigious publications, they like to ask me what it takes to become an exceptional writer. This is a huge classroom, so if I write stuff on the board, I don't think anybody will see it, but I usually write a diagram. That's a circle. And then I make kind of a plus sign in the middle to kind of divide it into fours. Because I think there's 4 things that it takes for someone to become an exceptional writer and to be able to do it on a high level like I've been able to do. The first one is you have to practice a lot, of course. I mean, that's pretty much the same with anything you want to be really good at, whether it's sports or singing or whatever. You have to practice, practice, practice. I also think, and maybe you'll get this later on in your career, maybe you'll work on it early, you have to have a really good editor who believes in your talent and believes in the voice that you want to have in your pieces and kind of guide you to the type of structure and the type of vocabulary you want to use in your pieces and get you to the potential that you can be at. The third thing, a lot of people shrug and when I say this, but it really is the truth, and I have learned this later in my career. It has to be really aggressive readers. And there's a difference between reading something just because you want to enjoy it and reading good writing. When I say reading, you need to be reading really good writing, because the more you expose yourself to really good writing, the easier it is when you're working on your own pieces to emulate good writing. And if you can emulate it, then you can get to riffing on it and making it kind of your own thing. I don't know if anybody can see it, but I spoke earlier today, and I wrote these three publications on the board because these are the publications that I read, and they're exceptional writers in here in these publications. This is Harper's Magazine, the Atlantic Monthly, and the New Yorker. The three magazines are all online, and you read these, there are only maybe a couple a week. You read these, you start to really get a sense for what really good writing looks like. I also like to recommend people read the classics. I know it's going to sound cliche, but you probably should read some Hemingway. You probably should read, Shakespeare. You probably read Steinbeck. These are men that were the best at putting words on page. They just literally were. That's why all their pieces are timeless. It's a reason. They're really good writers. And you internalize that, and you make yourself really good as a result. The fourth thing, the final thing, is almost kind of obvious too, but you got to just have the willpower to want to do this. You can't be lazy. You can't, this day I want to be a good writer, and the next day I just want to play Gears of War all day. You have to be really, really aggressive about wanting to be a good journalist and studying and practicing and reading really good writing. So just have the willpower and strength to want to do that. This is a really good one because you'll be a senior and you'll be ready to go out into the professional world, and there will be some things at your first job that you have to learn that you didn't learn at Central. So a lot of people ask me, is there any things that I wish I would have known at Central that I have to learn out there in the field? And the biggest one is, since I've been a reporter most of my career, I left here knowing how to write stories, but I didn't necessarily know how to cover a beat. Most of us who are going to be gathering news, no matter what the format is, at this early stage of our career, we'll have a beat. We'll cover city government, we'll cover cops, we'll cover education, we'll cover business, whatever. And I know how to write about those topics, but it's a little bit different when you have to go back to those same sources day in and day out to write about the same topic over and over again, or the same area, or the same, there's a continuity you have to do when you're covering a beat. And I didn't get that education here. So if there's one way that I can advise you guys to kind of get that education from here, get internships and get the editor at your internship to teach you how to cover a beat. Most internships, the good ones, are paid in there over the summer, and you won't get a whole encompassing lesson on covering a beat. But you'll be a lot more further ahead than I was when I graduated, because I basically had to learn how to cover a beat as I was covering a beat, which sucked really bad. Kind of made up my own, but it was okay, I guess. And another question that I'll be quiet so you guys can ask questions is, what type of things can you all do to be more valuable to future employers after you graduate? These two are probably going to sound cliche and obvious as well, but be a multimedia journalist, which means, you know how to shoot a decent video, photos and know how to write. There are more jobs opening on online platforms than ever before, especially more than when I was graduating. And you do want to be a full-time print writer at some point, and the publication just has an opening for an online producer. If you have the online skills, if you have the multimedia skills, that at least gets you into the door, and you can kind of finagle your way into that job you want at that organization. But at you first graduating from here, at that stage, you're just trying to get into the door any way as possible. And you help your chances a lot more if you have a lot more skills that will get you in there. So there's that, and you also really need to know what's going on in the industry as a whole. You can't operate in a vacuum in this industry. You have to know that print publications are losing circulation, and therefore they're losing revenue, and therefore they're cutting back on coverage areas, they're cutting back on staff. You have to know that a lot of content is migrating online. You just kind of have to know what's going on in the industry as a whole. And be a student of the industry that you're practicing. So those are my initial remarks. I wondered if anybody had any questions. Yeah.
What would you say is the most challenging part about being a graduate student in university?
Oh, yeah. I'm glad I have whole entire books, 450-page books that I have to read in 1 week's time. When I was going to school here and I would get assignments and to read articles, journal articles, or read chapters, they were during the week, I would moan about that. I'm in graduate school and I have to read entire books in 1 week, on top of long magazine articles. So there's an insane amount of reading that you have to do. And it's all good reading, but what happens is it really forces you to evaluate how you're spending your time outside of the classroom. Because you have so much to do and such little amount of time. The natural incline is to spend every waking moment reading, but of course you can't do that, your eyes will bleed. But it will, sure. So you try to create some type of time where you get as much reading done as humanly possible, but not go completely insane. And I don't know if I found that yet. That's why you asked what's the most difficult thing is. The most difficult thing is finding enough time to read all the stuff you have to read in graduate school. And I think that matters across all disciplines you study in graduate school. Because I had a buddy who got her master's in social work, and she also told me it's an insane amount of reading. So I think there's an insane amount of reading for master's degrees. You won't see that in my future. Other questions? Yeah.
When you were applying to grad school, what made you go to New York? Was it because of all the diversity there as far as people, or was it different reasons?
Funny story about that. NYU was my second choice. I went there because they accepted me. I actually wanted to go to Oregon. No. I haven't been that far out west, and green is my favorite color, and that's the school color, and I like the football team. I want to go to Oregon. So I applied to Oregon. I actually applied to 6 programs. I applied to Oregon. NYU was second, and a bunch of other ones in Iowa. And I got into NYU was my second choice, and my 6th choice, which was a small private school in Baltimore named Gallup College. And I didn't want to go there because it was kind of a low residency program, which means you're not living on campus and going to class, kind of structured situation you guys had here. It wasn't like that. NYU, you're on campus, and you're going to class, and you're working in groups, and it's more like I'm used to here. So I think that was my second choice. And I had been to New York City, so I kind of also familiar with that. I had been to conferences and seen my mentor. My mentor lives out there. He works for the Associated Press, so I had been through there to see him. So I kind of knew the area a lot more. I was more comfortable in making the move there. And of course, my family's still in Detroit, so it would have been a huge stretch to ask my mom to come visit me in Eugene, Oregon, as opposed to coming to visit me in Brooklyn, right? So those are the 2 big decisions and but I was used to that city already. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay.
What were some of the most interesting things that you learned while you covered higher education?
Some of the most interesting things I've covering higher education. In Nebraska, there's a huge population in the northeast corner of the state. There's a huge population of Sioux American Indians. They're in northwest Iowa, northeast Nebraska, and southern South Dakota. There's a huge patch out there. So when I was covering higher ed in Nebraska, of course I immediately thought I'd be covering what the University of Nebraska, Creighton University, which is there, and the community college there. And when I got into the newsroom and they kind of laid out my beat for me, they mentioned that I also had like tribal colleges to write about. Kind of similar to what we have here, but there's a couple in Nebraska, and I had never covered like a college that was specifically for American Indian tribe. So I went up there to do stories, and it's almost, even though it's in America and it's in an American state, it's almost like an entirely different world once you go to one of their campuses. It's almost like you step out of Nebraska and into an entire different state. Because it's only one area and I have it kind of blocked off there. And that used to be one of my favorite places to go to cover stories because it was so different. And it was also on land that was just incredibly beautiful. Everyone is always inspired when they go to school on campus that looks incredibly beautiful. So I would go up there early before I had an interview for a story, just to kind of walk around that. It was beautiful. Omaha is a metropolitan city, so it's great, and it's sidewalks and it's buildings, and we're used to, right? Going to northeast Nebraska to those tribal college campuses was a really good escape into rural, beautiful. I mean, everybody knows Nebraska for its tall corner stuff. I mean, it really was like that out there. And someone from Detroit, someone from the metropolitan area, that was a nice like change of scenery. It was kind of exotic too. I had never seen like tall corner stuff. Long term rises. It was really good. Yeah.
As a minority, going into media, do you feel like there are extra hoops or like you feel like you have to keep yourself more to make it in the media?
I feel like I probably would have if I didn't early on in my career latch on to a good mentor who was a journalist of color as well, and he kind of broke down those barriers for me. If you study journalism and you go out and you try to find a job and you don't have someone that kind of can open doors for you, it will feel that way. It will feel like a huge brick wall in front of you that you have to climb over to show that you're working, right? But if there's someone who's been in the business for a while, knows what good writing was like, knows what good reporting was like, he can vouch for you, that he's no wall. And I really encourage everyone in here, depending on what format you want to report for or what discipline you're in, find someone who's like you, who has a career similar to you, and try to be their mentee. That'll open so many more doors that you can't open yourself. It'll help you a lot. That person will go on to edit your cover letter, edit your resume, get you interviews that otherwise you may not have been able to. Just be a sounding board for ideas, help you with ethical questions in the middle of stories. That person is invaluable. The earlier you can get that person, the better, because they'll be able to vouch for you early on in your career, and they'll be able to test to how much you've grown as a journalist and prove to someone who is looking at you for a job that, hey, this guy is actually ready, or this lady is ready for this. I've known her since 2011 when she was back at school. She's grown a lot. This person is what you need right now. Everybody, please do that, because there's some things that you can control in your career and other things you can't. It's the big cliche of sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know.
If you could write anywhere or anyone, where would it be in line? Like, where do you want to end up?
Funny enough, I'm a Midwest boy. I want to go for the Indianapolis Star. I want to write narrative journalism for the Indianapolis Star. When I was going to school here, I was the president of the SBJ chapter. Everybody know SBJ, right? The Society of Professional Journalists. It's a huge advocacy group for reporters, editors, and we have a campus. We have a chapter here, and SBJ, the national organization, is based in Indianapolis. And I would go down there for conferences or workshops or something. And every time I went to Indianapolis, it just so happened that I just had the most amazing time of my life. I have no idea why, but I always had fun when I went to Indianapolis. And Indianapolis is a city that I can see myself being in for the rest of my life, but I equate it to fun. So if I worked at the Indianapolis Star, I lived in Indianapolis, it wouldn't feel like I'm working. It would feel like I'm someplace fun. And if what you're doing isn't work per se, you can do that for a lot longer. You can have decades and decades in your career, you can have a more prolific career if this is fun to you. Indianapolis, I can also see myself in Cincinnati. I'm a Midwest boy. I mean, I really am. I'm in New York City now, but I grew up in Detroit. I went to school in Mount Pleasant, so. Anybody else?
Kind of with that said about just growing up in Michigan,
Yeah.
what kind of changes did you have to adapt to moving to a big place like New York City?
You don't drive in New York City. You have to take the subway. And what happens is, you start to miss driving. And it's something really, really simple, right? You don't think of it when you drive the fast or not. But when you're in New York City, and every place you get to, you have to go down the stairs, into the subway, get on the subway with 80 other people, and you come up the stairs. It gets extremely, extremely exhausting. You have to get used to not having a car and depending on subway for your transportation. Most of the places that you'll live, apartment-wise, probably won't have a washer and dryer in it. So then you have to get used to taking all your dirty clothes and lugging them down the street to a laundromat. And same way with groceries, you don't have a car, so you have to take all the groceries you go out to the grocery store and either put them on the subway or put them in a taxi or walk them home. So it's very, very different. Get used to the fact that there's always someone on the street every time of the day. I mean, Dr. Tait kind of hinted to that a little bit, but it's absolutely true. 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, there's still people on the corner. I mean, sometimes they're loud, sometimes they're not, but there's never, particularly in Times Square, there's never an empty space in that city. There's always someone everywhere. I have to adapt to that. I have to adapt to the fact that there are people who just arrived from New York City, from some of the most remote corners of the globe, far west of here, far east of here. So, and there's those folks that you have to interact with. There's a lot of different cultures in New York City that may shock you when you first get there. But at the end of the day, everybody's just trying to get to work on time. Everybody's just trying to figure out what they want to do. And everybody's just trying to get home in time to watch the Simpsons. At the end of the day, we all do the same thing. It's just, yeah.
I have two questions.
Okay.
My question is whether you really want to provide for the region, the three presidents you always try to write for a more prestigious company. And my next question is, when writing, do you work on more than one piece at a time, or just focus on one piece, put all everything down?
I feel like if I work for the Free Press, or the Free Board of News, having lived in that city, I couldn't develop enough of what we call an aesthetic distance from it, like this sort of analytical eye on a city that was my hometown. I wouldn't be able to look at it in a subjective enough way to report on it fairly. I never did aspire to work there. I admire both of those papers. Know that they're both really good in the industry, and there are papers that some of them strive for. To your second part of your question, it's a luxury to be able to only work on one story at a time. Most of the time, I think you're juggling 2 or 3. It all depends on where you're working at and how much hustle they need out of you. At a bigger place like the Times or World, I worked on like 1 a week, but they were really, really good. The small paper I worked for in Virginia, I probably published once a day. Yeah, and I was always working on like 2 or 3 pieces at the same time.
Yeah, Chris, what's the most interesting story you wrote, or the one that's had the most impact on you?
Yeah, it was a story I wrote in Omaha, and it was about a guy who, after 63 years, he finally earned his bachelor's degree. What happened was, he started school, he graduated from high school, and he went on to this small private school in Nebraska. It was called Dome College, a small private school. And he just did like everybody else. He started school, and he was going to be a history major. He was going to teach history in high school. And he met this girl. She was 19. He was 21 or something. And they started a family. And all of a sudden, paying the bills got more important to finishing classes. So he kind of dropped out. And they had more kids, and the bills kept piling up. And he just kind of got them situated and got them on with their life and put his education off to the side. And then one day when his daughter looked up and said, Dad, you only have 3 more credits to do, and you can graduate. He was 80 at the time. And so his daughters and his wife and a couple of people at the college kind of, coached him into finishing that last course. And it's this one 80-year-old guy walking across stage with his bachelor's degree in social studies from Dome College. And it was a really good story because, like I said, I like covering higher education. And I thought that covering that piece shows that you can finish this degree, or any college degree, as long as you have the will, as long as you have the drive to do it. Although the external factors that go into keeping you from school can be suppressed for a while if you really focus on your education. So I really like that story. It got on the front page of Sunday World Herald, so that's like the most prestigious spot. Anybody else? Yeah.
If you could write out anything, what would it be?
If I could write one anything, like the topic. I would either write about, of course, higher education, or I would write on. I would write on places that are like small pockets in our country that rarely get written about. They're like small corners in cities in like Wyoming or in Vermont or in New Hampshire, places that really, there are interesting stories there, but from some way the media is structured in that state, very few people go out there and report those stories. So I want to be in this country, and I want to be in the most remote places that people rarely hear stories. Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Billings, Montana, places that really know. Higher education somewhere or way off somewhere. Anybody?
What were the major barriers you had to overcome to become a successful?
The biggest one was that I was stubborn about reading. I felt like it was a huge waste of my time in the early part of my career. And I felt like if I just kept writing, somehow miraculously be better. And then what happened was I saw all my other colleagues graduating with me here in the places they were going to and higher up how they were going. And I wondered how they were, going up higher before I was. They read a lot more, and they read really good writing. So their writing progressed and matured at a quicker rate than mine. I had to finally discipline myself to read as much as I do now. And then all of a sudden I just took off. All of a sudden I took off, and I'm writing for the New York Times because I'm able to recognize what good writing looks like. I'm able to mirror it and riff on it and make it my own while still doing the basics that it takes to put out something that's a journalistic report. You know, your research, your writing, your report, you know, all that basic stuff that you learn here was really graceful writing. And then all of a sudden, one of my biggest area. It was not making it a new area in Virginia or Nebraska. It was not any cultural shock or anything like that. It was, if I really want to be able to go to the next level, I have to discipline myself to read and look at what good writing is like and start out. Yeah.
Have you ever had any difficulties in your interviewing process? Like when trying to interview someone, have you caused any ethical problems with your articles?
It's always difficult to interview children. And you find yourself interviewing children a lot when you cover education. And you're writing a story about kindergarten and all the kids are like 5 or 7 or something. And you say, oh, so what did you think of that event? It was good. You're like, can't hold that, right? So that was always like the tricky thing in interviews when I'm interviewing like children. Ethical things, but interviewing people. Sometimes you'll have an interview and someone said something that's either grammatically or factually incorrect. And then you have to make a decision, well, do I fix their quote so they don't seem like an idiot, or do I completely throw them under the bus, right? Something that's blatantly wrong. Sometimes, depending on how long or how off the quote is, you discuss it with your editor. But if it's something that's slightly off, somebody said that instead of which, I'm okay with changing that. I am. I mean, you'll be different. It's all what your comfort level is. But if something is just egregiously wrong and you have it in quote form, then you wrestle a little bit with that because depending on who the person it is, there may be someone of like high prestige and they're saying this idiotic statement, and you may publish it, and it's, you know, they don't seem really intelligent in that comment. That happens more times than I can think of. And it's because we speak different in the way we write, you know. But we have to write down in quote form exactly what someone said. It's not always the most articulate opinion. So you'll have to deal with that if you'll develop your own sort of like sniff test. Yeah.
How long can it take to write a well-written summary?
Well-written is, it depends on the length, it depends on how much research you have to do, it depends on what publications you make. Something, for example, that goes in the New York or Atlantic Monthly, takes 6 months. And they're incredible amount of research. Something that goes to the Times, and take 2 weeks. If it's a really good one, that will be on the front, or that'll be on the front of Sunday, or they'll be in the New York Times magazine. Those take 2 or 3 months. If you've been doing it for a while, if you're used to it, if you know the structure, if it's your first piece for the Times, you're not used to their standard, you're not used to their style, you're not used to the level of reporting that they require, it may take twice as long. You know, you're just new to it. For our daily newspaper around the side that you guys will be writing for, or a station that you'll be reporting at when you get out of here, a good one will probably about a week.
Yes, I have a question. We in this class are looking at the images of Alana, or people of color in the media. What's your perception of that issue at this particular time?
My perception of media depictions of diverse people or diversity My thought is that it's a lot more sophisticated than we do. I still think there's a little bit more we have to go. But there were early parts of the 60s and 70s, even if you look at old cartoons, that really lampooned different attributes. And part of the reason that they were able to do it is because nobody raised their hand and said, yeah, that's wrong. But also it was because it was for comedic effect. Now people are they're speaking up about that. And they're speaking up and saying that is not an accurate portrayal of my cultural group or my beliefs or my gender or whatever that is. And for the most part, I think the media industry has responded. And they are a lot more sophisticated in how they depict the different cultural groups in the media. You'll have a couple of hiccups whenever something like terrorism comes up, and all of a sudden people from the Middle East are like kind of, singled out. But aside from that, and that happens every once in a while, aside from that, I think the industry has made huge strides when you compare it to a few decades ago. There's still some work to do, but a lot better than it used to be. A lot better. I hope. But thanks everybody for listening to me ramble on. I appreciate it.